I met David Greer at a Seth Godin event in New York City, and David offered me a coaching session. I took David up on his offer, and he was able to help me get through a rough 2-week period where I was juggling getting my CPE done for the year, prepping the kids for a first robotics tournament where they won and made it to the state championships, and then launching this podcast all over the Christmas holidays. As I said, David Greer helped me to create the time and the space needed to get this podcast launched. Well worth the time spent with him. Having someone to coach you and help you get your stuff done is very important, and we're going to learn why today. Let's meet our guest, David. Welcome to Richer Soul, David. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Rocky. It's my pleasure.
David, you inspire people to take action and get things done. You've helped them get unstuck for over 35 years. You coach people, you wrote a book, Wind in Your Sails, and you're a sought-after speaker. You help people become successful. That's really awesome.
Well, thanks so much. I love helping people get to where they want to go.
As do I. And there's some things that we have in common. And at the base of everything, I think are the values that we have as people. And I want to talk about some of your values because they're very much embodied in what we do here at Richer Soul. I know you talk about a zest for life. You talk about inspiring people to live without holding back. You like to work with others to get stuff done. And of course, at the center of all of that is your family. And it seems like you're constantly learning and improving. How did you come up with all of these values?
I think the values were there, and it was more working with others to kind of hold up the mirror. You know, I've been a software guy for a long time. I joined a young software startup when I was in university, and as the first hire after the founders. And I liked the place. I stayed 20 years. And towards the end of my tenure there, I brought in some outside people. And, you know, I still kind of thought myself as a computer programmer. And these individuals kept meeting me, and they kept holding up a mirror, and on the mirror was written entrepreneur. And I said, no, you guys, you don't get it. Like, I'm just a software programmer. And they'd hold up the mirror, entrepreneur. And like, it took a while to realize that, you know, I had one way or another been an entrepreneur for probably 15 years or longer, but I still didn't think of myself that way. And that was like a breakthrough moment. And so sometimes, you know, it's just having people reflect back to me my behaviors and what I do. And some of it is from self-reflection and kind of that path. And eventually, you know, I go, yeah, these are the things that are important to me.
That's impressive. One of the things that we like to talk about with these values is keeping them balanced. It's so easy to have life pull things in different directions and trying to balance work and family and helping other people. How have you been able to keep balance in your life?
To start with, I believe the notion of balance, or at least perfect balance, doesn't exist. Like, we move into some areas where we might devote more of our time and energy to career. We might devote more of our time and energy to ourself and our own development, or to our family. The thing that I ask or talk about, or certainly ask of clients, is that you don't just let external events like drag you one way or another helter-skelter, but that you start bringing conscious choice as to where you want to focus those energies. And if you want to go out of balance, that you do so with forethought and through conscious choice. And you can let others around you know, this is the choice I'm making right now. You might not agree with it, but this is what I feel is the right thing for me. I'm going to go focus on my work or my career because I'm feeling behind on that, and for whatever reasons. And so I think sometimes we read or hear people talk about like there's some notion of perfect balance, and I don't think it exists. I think it's all kind of waves, and you're which wave are you riding right now, and where are you deciding to put your focus, both time and energy? Because sometimes it's a small amount of time, but it's a ton of energy, or sometimes it's the reverse. And so the way I split it up is I have my career work, I have myself, and I have my life and my relationships. So I actually have goals for the year in all three of those areas.
And so what I'm hearing from you, which is similar to what I hear from many others, is that you're intentional in how you do these things. You've thought them through. You've got plans and goals for each of them. And that's how, in a sense, you keep them balanced. And of course, as you said, balance doesn't mean they're all equal, but you find a way to get the things done that you want by looking ahead and seeing what you want and being intentional about it.
Yeah, my mom's going to turn 90 this year, and so one of the goals for my year is to make sure that we figure out a way to celebrate it. And she lives about 750 miles away, so to be there in some way physically for her birthday, and it would be really easy to skip over all that. I mean, I made sure it's one of my priorities for the year.
Well, congratulations for that. We all hope to live to be 90 and be in good health when we get there. So I'd like to take a little bit of a step back. You mentioned that you started out in, I believe, computer programming. And to go from computer programming into coaching, to me, is somewhat of a leap. It's not a standard path. How did that happen?
So several kind of pieces to that puzzle. So one is, when I was about 14, I knew I wanted to take computers and business and put them together. And so I was just fortunate that as a young individual, I had this vision clarity, partly through some teachers that I had in middle school, some experiences. I come from an entrepreneurial family. So that piece I'd already decided on. So when I was getting my computer science degree, I even got a part-time job at a cable company that was using a very modern computer system. So I was actually applying that while I was getting my degree. But, when I joined this young software startup company, it was named Robelle for the two founders, Robert and Annabelle. And they required that I submit an abstract to the HP International User Group meeting, which was going to happen about 8 months later. And lo and behold, that was accepted. And the requirement was for me to go write a paper and be at the conference and do a presentation. So those are all just requirements of getting the job. So those are all, more people-oriented skills. Like it was a very, very technical talk, but I had to stand up in front of an audience. I had to talk to them. And even at that very first convention, I was in the San Jose convention floor, 22 years old, selling software, but I had no idea that's what I was doing. I was really telling a bunch of computer geeks about this cool stuff and what it would do for them. And as I mentioned, it was kind of decades later that I learned that's the essence of marketing and selling, which is really about connecting with people and with their problems. And as I worked at Robelle and then eventually became a partner, the most satisfying parts of that career were actually developing people, challenging them, helping them to grow. And I'd always, liked people, liked being with people. I played team sports mostly in high school. I liked that team, going after a common goal, collaboration. So that's how I kind of take that geeky computer science skills and navigate it through into something that's much more people oriented.
And I guess that's why you're successful, because when I think of computer people, and my son is one of them, it seems that people skills and computer skills don't always go together. And the fact that you have both makes you a little bit different than most of them. And that's just my kind of viewpoint of that. So stepping forward, you're now a coach and you help people get things done. I think for a lot of people, the idea of coaching is somewhat new. In sports, we all think we have a coach who helps us on a team, but a lot of people don't have a coach in life to help them make the right decisions, to get stuff done, and to move forward. What are some of the things that you've seen or some of the reasons that people should look to have a coach help them be successful?
Well, first off, it's very rare in life to have someone in your life who is 100% in your corner without any, emotional attachment or, intermixing family or other things, but just someone who has an independent perspective and who is also 100% in your corner. So I think that's one of the real powers of coaching. And I mean, part of why I became a coach is because in 2007, I was at a stage in my career where I had left Robelle. I'd done some exciting things. I'd tried, early stage investing and worked on that, and it just was not fulfilling me. And I ended up meeting an amazing coach, Kevin Lawrence, coachkevin.com. And he made me more uncomfortable in 5 minutes than I'd been in, I don't know, half a dozen years. I literally kind of had tears at the corner of my eyes. I ended up hiring him. Worked with Kevin for 9.5 years. And, just that conversation where he really, discovered in a very short amount of time where I was really unhappy and I didn't even really realize how unhappy I was, I think shows the power of coaching and the power of Kevin's coaching. And, just having someone who's been in my corner that long and just help bring me clarity, hold me accountable, and done a lot of other amazing things. I mean, eventually, why I decided to become a coach is I want to give to other entrepreneurs and people some of the gifts that Coach Kevin has given to me.
That's an amazing story. I think a lot of people live their lives with regrets, and a lot of people hold back from their dreams. And sometimes even when offered the opportunity, they don't leap. And that's a shame, because a life of regrets is not a life worth living. And I'm kind of new here, and so I'm trying to figure this through. What are some of the things that you've helped people find in their life to overcome and help them in achieving their dreams?
Okay, a whole bunch of pieces to that. So I gotta say, first of all, I'm someone who plays to win. And that's unusual. Most people play to not lose. And it's a mindset shift, right? A lot of people are afraid of success. Like, they're literally afraid of success for a whole ton of different reasons.
That's surprising to me. Why are people scared of success?
Because they don't think they're worth it. Because success was put down in their family of origin. Like, oh, look at them, those people, they're so successful and rich and they never talk to us. There's just all sorts of subtle reasons why you might be afraid of success. If you achieve that success, maybe there's not a new challenge for you. Maybe you think there won't be a new challenge, and what you thrive on is the challenge. So there's no simple answer to that. It's just something that I observe. And I in my book, Win in Your Sales, I worked with a woman, Carrie Lathwell. Well, I worked as a fellow employee for 10 years together, and then she was my first report for 10 years after I became a partner in Robelle. And a couple of years after I'd moved on and she'd moved on, I sat down with her at lunch and I said, Carrie, I'm really curious about something. And that is, what's the one thing you remember most about my being your boss? And I was completely open to whatever the answer was. And she said, David, over and over and over again, you asked me to do things that I knew in my heart of hearts were impossible for me to do. And every single time I did them. I think, if I died today, I'd be happy with that legacy. And to me, I believed in her. I never asked Carrie to do something that I didn't believe she could do. So my belief was already there. Her belief wasn't, but my belief in her was, which is why I asked her to do it. And then I like to think most of the time I also gave her enough support and other things around her so that she could succeed. So I wasn't setting her up to fail. I was setting her up to win. And I think that's what I do a lot of as a coach, is I actually believe in the person when they can't believe in themselves. And I just hold that space for them until they get to a point where they believe it themselves.
And I look at that as taking teeny little steps. We take one step today, another step tomorrow. And if you keep taking those steps, we eventually get to where we want. Maybe not as fast as we want, or sometimes far further than we ever actually expect to get. And so that's impressive. I coach kids. Go ahead.
I'll just interrupt for 1 sec. There's an assumption in that statement you just made, though, which is what we want. And a lot of my work with clients is oftentimes helping them to clarify what they want. Because what they think they want and what they really want are sometimes different. And then also what they want, they haven't written it down. They haven't actually put it on a piece of paper and said, yeah, this is my goal. Like in 3 years, this is where I want to be. And there's a lot of power in actually helping someone to clarify that and then get them to actually write it down. Even if you don't refer to it again, just the actual process of writing it down somehow changes us as humans, makes us more likely we'll get there. Because you said the next step on the path, but the question is the path leading to where? And if you're really clear on where you're going, then the path may wander quite a bit and you're more likely to get to where you want to go. So I just wanted to, that's a piece, knowing where to go, that's really important and that people often need quite a bit of help with.
And that's the biggest thing that I've actually found, is that when you talk to most people and you ask them their bigger purpose and where they're heading to, invariably, I don't get a clear answer. More often than not, it's almost never written down. When I see people who are successful, who've done things well, the words I hear are they're intentional in what they do. They've got a plan and a goal. It's written down and they know where they're going. And I struggled with that myself for years in finding that purpose and writing it down. And I understand why that's a struggle. How do you help people to truly find the purpose they want? And I say that because I know there are some people, my wife is one of them, like she knew from a very young age what she wanted and where she was going. I didn't have that clarity. And I see a lot of people who are in my situation who don't have that clarity. So how do we help people find that clarity of purpose?
I think I see it as a process. So I mentioned it earlier that, I was fortunate in that early on I knew I wanted to do business and computers and pursued that career and, now have a new vision. So, some of us are more fortunate in that area than others. And we all have weaknesses. I've had to do more work on what my personal vision is and making sure I carve out enough time for myself. And again, I think it's very challenging to do it all by yourself. I mean, even if you don't decide to go the route of hiring a professional coach, even having mentors in your life who you can meet with and talk with, it's a process. Like and oftentimes the process looks like you slowly over time clear away all the things are not aligned or don't work for you. And sometimes you just keep putting those things down till it's like, oh, well, that's the only thing left. So sometimes you can just kind of do that leap and come to something that's really clear for you. And sometimes it's just a chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away, and eventually clarity comes. And again, my experience is it's a lot easier to chip away when you've got someone else helping you, or at least reflecting back to you, maybe holding you accountable. Much more likely that you'll actually get to that. Because it's, Mostly it's hard work. Like it's not stuff we come to naturally, and it's not things. I don't think a lot of, I guess, modern media or what we're taught in school is not. They don't teach you in school, hey, David, what's your purpose in life? Right? We're taught a bunch of skills: how to read, how to write, how to do math. But this softer stuff, which is actually more important in a lot of ways to us leading fulfilling, enjoyable lives, isn't really talked about.
I can't agree with you more. And I think that's a big part of the message I'm trying to get out as well. And I resonate with the chipping away because that was how I came to my plan. I just went through all the things. I'm like, no, I don't want this. No, I don't want that. No, that doesn't work. And after saying no to so many things, it created that openness to say, okay, here is the way to go. And when I talk to some people, that's the one thing I find. Sometimes people say, I want to do this. But when you sit down and you talk to them, I find that when you actually look at what it takes or what it means to do that, they decide that that's not really what they wanted to do. And I think part of it is that they weren't intentional in thinking through what it was that they truly wanted and what it actually meant to be that. So, classic example, I was just talking with someone recently who had originally wanted to go to Wall Street and make a lot of money there, but once he found out what the lifestyle of that was, realized that is not what he wanted as part of his bigger picture.
Well, kudos to that individual for figuring that out and not having to go spend 10 years on Wall Street to get there, right? Like that's quite an achievement.
It is. I actually congratulated him because he actually did it while he was still in college. He made that shift. So he was smart enough to get that answer early and quick. One of the things that I think we all do, and I know you've talked about this, is we always see these fancy, shiny red balls out there that we decide we want to chase without thinking through them. Or life presents these opportunities that seem like big, shiny, fancy things that we might want. And yet it truly doesn't fit in. So how do we stop ourselves from chasing the fancy red ball?
So I think some of it is what we've already talked about. So when you're clear on your purpose and where you're going and your values, then it gets a lot easier to say, yes, that shiny red ball got my attention. And, it's not aligned with the lifestyle that I want. And, so the person you talked about with Wall Street, it's, the money and maybe the other things were appealing, and there was this huge price to go with it, and it didn't align with that individual's values, so it got easy to say no. And I think that's the power we want to move to, is so it's a lot easier to say no. Otherwise, we just keep riding the adrenaline rush of the next shiny thing, because we get that initial hit of excitement because we haven't thought through the work. And so it's easy to flit from, little juice of adrenaline excitement to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And I don't believe that sustains us.
No, it's not sustainable, and it keeps pulling us further and further away from where we truly want to be. So I think it's clear that knowing your purpose is important. Do you have any suggestions for people who are trying to find their purpose of some ways they can go about doing that? We talked about figuring out what you don't want to do. Are there resources out there besides a coach that you might recommend? Or
Sure. So I can give you a couple different ideas. One is StrengthsFinders 2.0 is a book you can buy. And in it has a one-time use survey that you go take. And it's an online survey. And the book's like $35, maybe it's $40, and it includes this assessment. And you get this whole assessment of what your 5 top strengths are out of, I think it's 40 or 45. And then in the book, it has 1 chapter per strength. And so you can go read about, how the strength shows up. But the survey responses also give you a lot of questions to go ask yourself, like how those strengths are showing up in your work environment, how they're showing up in other parts of your life. So that can be both excellent so that you can get some insight at a very low cost into your strengths. And you also, the material that you get from completing the survey gives you questions and things you can go do if you're so willing, that you can learn more about yourself. So that's one relatively low cost. Another exercise I oftentimes have people do, 2 other exercises actually. One is to sit down and make a list of all the challenges you've overcome in your life. I was just listening to one of your podcasts where you talked about that, individuals looking at what they've already achieved. And I find a way of getting at that is thinking about it in terms of challenges you've overcome, because those are the things we tend to remember the most. And there's a few things for that. One is to just remind yourself of who and what you are today and how far you've come. No matter what your age, you will have overcome a lot of challenges in your life. And then also to spend some time reflecting and seeing what patterns there are. So you may have had a similar approach to overcoming all of those challenges. So that might be one of your strengths. Or it could be a weakness. It could be that you always, first, when you have a challenge, you duck it or ignore it or avoid it, which is pretty common for all of us. And you may see some patterning in that. So that's the challenges exercise. And then the third one is an exercise called What Makes Me Tick? And one way to get at that is to write a story about your ideal day. And have parts of the day that are just about you, part of the day about your life or your family, your relationships, and then, what it is about your work. And be really specific, like the alarm goes off at 5:15, I get out of bed and I'm feeling great and I've had a good night's sleep. And write the story of your ideal day. I find that also can really help people to clarify, these are all the things that make my ideal day. And then for most people, they'll find that their average day is a long ways away from their ideal day, and they could actually take some small steps. Again, the path and what you want is your ideal day. And you can start taking some steps on a path to make more of each day more like your ideal day. And usually in your ideal day, what shows up is the key things like what makes me tick, which is where I got some of those values that you shared at the beginning of the podcast, right? My zest for life. That came out of both, what makes me tick. Sailing, for example, is one of the things that really makes me tick. And overcoming challenges, some of the biggest challenges I've overcome have been while sailing. So kind of both of those. And so some of my zest for life is overcoming challenges when I'm sailing.
Wow, that's impressive. As I listen to what you said, at the core of that is we need to take time to shut everything else down and have conversations with ourselves to truly understand who we are and what we want. And I think too often it seems like many people are on a hamster wheel and they don't take that time to stop, sit back and say, who really am I? What is it that I want? And then I think a lot of times, and maybe you can share some insights on this, we've got these voices in our head telling us we're crazy or we can't do that or that's not possible. Is that what you find when someone comes to you and they can finally stop and listen to themselves and figure it out?
So some of the power, so I'm going to actually name that voice. So in coaching terms, we call that voice the saboteur. And we all have a saboteur. So everyone who's listening to this, be confident that Rocky, that me, that everyone you know has their own saboteur. And you can choose, you actually do have a choice as to whether to listen to the saboteur or not. And in my experience, by actually coaching people to name their saboteur, actually helps to raise your own awareness of when the saboteur is showing up. Because most of the time we just react to this. We're not even conscious that we're reacting to this negative voice inside ourselves. And so to me, some of making progress comes from naming. Like, I have a taskmaster spirit. And it took me a long time to realize that, and I needed to name my taskmaster spirit, because my taskmaster spirit lets me get a lot done. So it's hugely powerful. And sometimes it totally works against me. Like, because I'm trying to get the next thing done rather than to spend time contemplating and figuring out what makes me tick. Two other pieces I'd like to reflect on what you're suggesting there is, I do think you need to take the time out to be able to reflect on this. And I get back to, it's really important to have a mentor or someone you trust, so who you can share that with. Because you might go do that reflection and then come back and share it with someone, and they'll just point out 10 counter examples. So sometimes we're not the best at figuring it out about ourselves. We actually need someone else to, again, it's that story I shared about holding up a mirror, and on the mirror it said entrepreneur, and I kept going to these people saying, you don't get it, I'm not an entrepreneur. And they were like, you don't get it. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time, right? So it's a combination of that. And then I'll just add one other little piece, which is, in order to get what we want, we oftentimes need to take something out of our lives so we can open up the space and possibility for something new. So if we're constantly on the hamster wheel, as you said, which I think is a great analogy, if we don't do something to take hamster activities out, we probably will never get to actually that time for self-contemplation. So, which is, again, conscious choice and intention to actually create space so you can do that.
Certain themes keep coming through. From every interview that I have of people who are successful, and from listening to people who are successful, it's that being intentional, knowing that purpose, having help, and help meaning the mentor, the coach, somebody at your back who helps you to become successful. And I think one of the things you talked about, and I think we all have it in different ways, is to know the elephant in the room. And a lot of times we don't see the elephant in the room of who we are and how we act in certain situations that are so natural to us. I think I was just having this conversation with someone else. When you're naturally good at something, you just assume that everybody is naturally good at it because it didn't take you any effort to get there. And I refer to that as almost the elephant in the room. And I think in your case, you were the entrepreneur. That was your elephant in the room. And sometimes we need somebody outside to help us do that. And coaches are probably an excellent person to do that, because they do it without all of the drama and all the emotions. And I think you said that in the beginning.
Yes, because we're not vested. We're just vested in doing the best thing that we can do for the client, and we don't have any other agenda. We're not trying to keep other family members happy or workmates happy. Like, we really can stand apart and just be there for the other person.
So I think a lot of people may not know what a coaching process looks like or how it works over time. It sounds like your coach has been with you for a long time. Could you give people a little bit of an understanding of the process of coaching and how that works overall?
Sure. And you said the key word, process. So, it takes time. It takes time to figure this out. It takes time to change our behaviors. It takes time for us to become aware that we even have these behaviors so that we can actually do something to change them. And so working with a coach or a mentor is not something where you meet once and everything is changed. It's very much a process of continual feedback and work over time. And there's a coaching maxim, which is most of the work is done between sessions. So, this is a journey of me helping someone else become, whatever is right for them next. And part of that journey is their willingness to want to change and grow. So, for example, I don't take on clients who don't have at least indicated some willingness to change and grow. So if you have no willingness to do that, I don't think any coach in the world is going to help you. So it has to start with you wanting to have some change in your life or be willing to consider new ways of doing things. And then it's about trusting someone else. And that's why also in the early days, it's all about building a trust relationship, and that in any kind of trust relationship takes time. It takes time to get to know each other. It takes time to try some things and realize that, I'm not being judged by this other person. I'm not being hurt by this other person. I should trust them more. And as that trust builds, it actually opens up more possibility for change. So, for example, for me, my minimum coaching agreement that I would do is 2 1 hour phone meetings a month with a minimum 6 months. Because I think in 6 months you can make some meaningful difference, but I think less than 6 months it's very challenging to have made enough significant change. And of course, I look at my 9 years with Coach Kevin, and we have just continually built momentum over the 9 years. And it's just, my life has just continued to get better and better and better as we've continued to do the work together. And I look at my time with Coach Kevin as just, it's a gift to myself. It's the most important gift that I give to myself.
That's awesome. And I think that's one thing that might be a mindset thing that people don't realize, is that as you get older, your life is getting better. And I think a lot of people might think of that in the opposite. And I know as I've gotten older, my life has gotten better. I'm in better physical shape than I've ever been. I think mentally I'm better than I've ever been. And I don't know if that's a mindset that's normally talked about, that life improves with age. And I think that's impressive that you're able to do that as well.
Well, and I think we have some societal things that work against us. We have this whole story that, we go to school and we, create a career, and then we go work for 40 years and then we retire and do what we really want. Which I think that's completely 100% broken. I think every single day you should get up and be doing things that you want, and it should be fulfilling. And I think there should be hardly any lines, or they should certainly be blurred, between you, your life, your relationships, and your work. And you should get fulfillment from all of those. Why wait to retirement? So what'd you do for the 40 years in between? So, but I think that we have this kind of model, and it's kind of popular media and probably Hollywood. They all tend to tell this story that's really easy. That's the story we hear, so it's really easy to buy into it. But I'm with you. I think that all the things you just stated, I'm 59 years old, and I feel like you. I'm the fittest I've ever been. I'm probably living I am living a more fulfilling life, certainly more than I did 30 years ago, much more consciously aware, much more engaged with my family, relationships, people around me, and it just keeps getting better.
I'm in the same boat as you. And I like it. And I guess, that's one of the reasons I started this whole thing is that it's countercultural in the sense to say that this is possible. And I came at this from a financial standpoint. My background is in understanding money to some sense. And I would go to all these financial planners and they'd say, sure, we're going to sit down. We're going to help you. We're going to help you plan your life. And at the end, all they did was talk about money. And they never even talked about my life. And I'm like, somebody's got to talk about this balance of creating a life and using your money and your time to live that life to the fullest, just like you mentioned. So I appreciate
and I think all of us come with a lot of baggage around what money means to us. I mean, money's money. A dollar is a dollar. I'm Canadian, so my Canadian dollar is worth less than your American dollar right now. But the point is, if I had 10 American $1 bills and you had 10 American $1 bills, they are worth exactly the same. And yet you might feel completely different about those 10 $1 bills than I do, right? Which is from our family of origin, what we learned. It's the stories we tell ourselves, and they're all stories, right? And if you want to change the experience, change the story. And my guess is you do that a lot with your client.
I do. And that's what it's all about. It's opening, I think first and foremost, it's just opening the door to say that is not the only story. There are multiple stories out there. You pick the one that you want to live and then start taking the steps towards your story. And I think that comes right back full circle. Mm-hmm. Here is my story, my purpose, and now I'm going to be intentional about building it. And every day I'm going to take one more step towards writing my story. And I'm not going to get distracted by that shiny red ball. I don't know why more people don't talk about this and spread this kind of a message.
Because it's a lot easier to just be the hamster on the wheel. Like, to some extent, it's like I know where the walls are. I know that the wheel's spinning, right? I know that I'm moving. So I have inertia. It doesn't matter. I'm not going anywhere because I haven't set any goals. So I don't actually know I'm not going anywhere. It's a courageous move to step out of the hamster wheel. I really believe that. I really believe it's a courageous move to take that step. And more people need the courage. And I hope that people like you and you said part of my values inspire. I mean, that's part of why I do the work that I do, why I do speaking, do this podcast, wrote a book, is to inspire people to have the courage to say, hey, if I can do it, I know you can do it. And you're worth it.
Absolutely. I have a saying to kind of help people through that, and I use it kind of with my kids, more so from an action point. It's to leap with a parachute. If you can leap with a parachute, you're not going to hurt yourself. And so I think people think if they want to go do something that they have to make this big, massive change. And no one's ever going to make big, massive change. But if we leap with a parachute, which to me is a tiny little step in a direction, you really can't get hurt. And if you fail, that's okay. You just get up and you try again. And I think, and that's something maybe you can help me with and dig into that. Failure in our society is a bad word, and I don't think it should be. Failure just means you learn something. And as long as you've learned something, then get up and do it again, and get up and do it again. And if you can keep your failures very small and manageable, and you understand that every time you failed, you're a step closer to massive success, then it makes it easier. And it also, the story in our minds is easier to overcome when we know that failure is success. I don't know what you found with your coaching clients.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the challenge is we can accept that in our head, but it's really easy or it's really hard to pull it into our heart and to really believe it with all our emotions for a whole wide variety of reasons. Because, we grew up in a school system where you've got marks and, good marks supposedly make you better. So we have all that conditioning that starts way back then. So again, the story is that we can't fail because that's what real success is not failure. So I agree with you 100%. And some of my own personal work, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So this has been really hard for me to totally accept that failure is the absolute perfect path for me to figure out what my next success is going to be. And to get past my head, which just wants to keep saying, well, but I have to do it perfect. Have you ever done this before? No. So what would make you think that the first time you're going to do something you've never done before, you're going to be perfect? Well, actually, there is nothing, no data to actually suggest that would be the case. So I guess I have to get okay with failing.
Overcoming ourselves.
Yep. There I am. Front and center is still my biggest stumbling block.
When I was reading through your website, one of the things you had said was that you want to prevent people from making some of the mistakes that you've made. Would you care to share a couple of those?
Yeah, and that's totally true. And I'm just trying to come up with a couple, especially in the context of my book. I came to marketing late. So when we built Robelle, we were hugely successful, massively successful, 2 home run product lines. And it was an awesome experience in a lot of ways. And I don't want to say this is a regret. And occasionally I wish I had learned more about marketing sooner. For one thing, I think we would have priced some of our products differently. I think that we gave away a lot of value. And it worked for us. We still did extremely well. So that's for example, one piece is really understanding marketplaces and what drives them, and especially values. So for a long time, I priced products on a cost basis. So it costs us this much, so we'll charge 20% more, and that's enough profit margin. When in reality, I could have charged 500% more because that's what the market truly valued, and that was the value that I was actually delivering. It wasn't like I'm making this up. We were actually delivering that value. So that would be one example from my career of increased awareness earlier in my career might have given me more opportunities in business. I think you mentioned about launching with a safety net. Earlier in our conversation, I talked about my first report for 10 years, Carrie Lathwell, and how I challenged her for that entire 10-year period to do things that she never believed she could do. And what maybe she didn't sense or know was I always made sure there was a parachute firmly attached. So I never asked her to do something that if she failed, the whole business would fail. That project might fail, that task might fail, but there was always a safety net underneath it, and that I knew I was managing the risk around it. And maybe I never made that clear to her, but really there was a safety parachute. And I actually talk about some of that story in my book. So that's another, I think, as a manager, as an entrepreneur, as someone who wants to develop people, I think you need to both encourage people to fail, but actually let them fail. But do so in a way that's safe, in a way that after the fact you can go to them and say, look, yes, you failed, but here's really what the consequences were. I had a woman I was working with in my last role as VP of Marketing for WebTech Wireless, and she printed a whole bunch of brochures. And even though we'd had very, very careful proofreading, they came back and there was a mistake. And she met me and she was in tears, and she took total ownership, all the things you want from an employee. And I looked at her and I said, what's the right thing to do? She said, the right thing to do is to print new brochures. I said, what are you waiting for? And, okay, so you made a mistake, but you know what the right thing is to do. And financially, it was like 0.1% of the total budget. So really the financial risk was minuscule. So those are just a couple examples I can come up with off the top of, I want entrepreneurs to help them grow their teams and their employees by some of the stories and what's shared in my book.
And I think that's an important thing, whether you be an employer or a parent, is to allow people the opportunity to fail with the safety net and help them through the process, because that makes them stronger. I have another saying that I like. It comes out of the Bible. It's, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And it isn't that I should sit here and sharpen you. It's that you should sharpen me, and I should accept a little bit of heat and a little bit of sparks and take a little bit of that rubbing that creates friction so that I can become better and sharper. And having that opportunity of a two-way street like that is just amazing. And I think that's one of the things a coach can also help do, is to help sharpen you in those areas and make sure that you're doing it in a safe space.
Well said. And, as my coaches shared with me, it is a two-way street in that coaches always learn from their clients.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this earlier, and I want to make sure I reiterate it. The coach doesn't do the work. It's up to the people to do the hard work. We're just here to kind of help and guide and to show opportunities and directions and, so to speak, open the mindset up to new ways of thinking. But you've actually got to do the hard work yourself. And
yes, and I think also for me anyways, as a coach, I do a lot around the accountability piece. People know what they need to do. They just need someone to hold their feet to the fire so that they actually do what they already know that they need to do.
Accountability. It's another big part of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we have not talked about that you would like to share?
Life's a journey. Enjoy it. And I hope your listeners find their own path and their own, what is most fulfilling for them. And I hope that you and I have helped to inspire a few more people to lead their own version of what is a fulfilling life for them.
What you said is very important. It's for them to find their path. Not my path, not your path, not whoever,
their parents, their spouses, we got a lot of people who we think are defining our path. But the truth is, actually, most people just want us to be happy and to figure out what's best for us and be on our own path.
Correct. And you have to take your own path. You can't ask for someone to create a plan and say, here's my plan, I'm going to go follow your path, because that doesn't work. You've got to make your own path forward.
It's your life.
I want to say thank you. You actually helped me tremendously in the couple weeks leading up to the launch of this podcast. I had 3 major things that I needed to accomplish, and I had 2 weeks to get them done, and you helped give me clarity and direction and accountability. And from that, I was able to knock that out and get them all done. And here we are, many episodes later, and not that long a time frame. I think we spoke in December, so a little over 2 months ago, and how far I've come. So I thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome, and I'm thrilled that I had a chance to help you, and I'm really thrilled with the results. I think your podcast is great, and I hope that a lot of people listen and a lot of people gain a lot from the wisdom that you're sharing.
Thank you. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find your work?
On my website, djgreer.com. And so it's Coach David James Greer. And from there, there's lots of information about me, information on my book, and on every page at the bottom is my email address, and there's a contact form where it's easy for you to get in touch with me.
So I encourage everyone to do that. Check out the book. It's a nice, easy way to say thank you to David and to help him out. So thank you again, David, for being here today.
Thanks so much, Rocky. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Once again, we see that the keys to a successful life are the same. You need to know your purpose. You need to have it written down. And you need to overcome yourself as you take this journey called life. Knowing where we are going helps us to keep focus and avoid distractions. I encourage you to check out David's site, and there is a link in the show notes. And if you think he can help you, please take the leap and reach out to him. Until next time.